The South African population has exploded to over 62 million. That's the official numbers. It's about 10 million more people in our country since 2011. Essentially, it translates to a population growth rate of 19.8%. The census numbers do show a decline in the white population from 11% in 1996 to 7.3% in 2022. We'll break down some of the other classifications in just a moment. Hermann Pretorius from the Institute of Race Relations. Hermann, good morning to you and appreciate it. And it's a staggering increase when you consider how high unemployment is, how bad our service delivery is, and how difficult it is for infrastructure to even keep our current population supplied with what they need. How worried are you about how quickly our population is exploding?
It's a relative question. If we are seeing economic growth and population growth, that's not a problem. But we're seeing population growth and very, very little economic growth. In fact, per capita GDP growth is essentially negative for South Africa over the last 10 years. We shouldn't see a large population as a challenge as long as we can treat a larger population as a larger demographic for skills development, for consumers, for businesses, for skills development. A large population per se is not a negative thing. But when you couple a large population with an increasing dependence on state services rather than upward socioeconomic momentum where growth is the key, then it becomes concerning. As you mentioned, schools, infrastructure, roads, rail, hospitals, these things become incredibly burdened if the population grows, but the dependency on the state rather than an upward socially mobile population remains intact. That's when things become dangerous.
Let's talk about the racial breakdown then from the census as well. I'm going to go all the way back to 1996 and then compare directly with 2022. White population numbers are down. We're going to go through their various classifications, but white population down quite a lot. What do you read into that?
Well, I think if you look at the actual numbers rather than as a proportion, the white population of South Africa has remained essentially the same. 11% in 1996 was around 4.5 million of the population at the time, and the 7.3% of the white population today is around 4.6 million. So we don't see, as it were, an absolute decline in the numbers of white people in South Africa, even though it is a relative decline. Now, there are a few reasons for that. Number one is I think we have to be honest about the reality of immigration, that over the last 15 years, many white South Africans, especially people of my generation, have sought economic opportunity overseas. That has changed in the last 5 years, where the numbers of black South Africans emigrating and the numbers of white South Africans emigrating are roughly the same. Then we look at other factors that might have caused the sort of relative shrinkage of the white population. The white population, more than any other demographic group in South Africa, is what is in the middle class, as it were. And it is a global phenomenon that your middle socioeconomic brackets definitely maintain population size more than they grow. Population growth with your middle class globally is always slower than perhaps your poorer demographics. So this really cuts to the fact that we see a socio-demographic divide in South Africa, I think much more than a racial divide in South Africa. And then there's also just the fact that if you are in a country that is 80% plus black, then the pure mathematics of it, that dominant race group will grow at a faster pace relative to a smaller demographic. That just makes sense.
Hermann, as I say goodbye to you in just a moment, I want to just get a sense then, Tommy and I were talking about this, the classification can be a contentious issue as it has been for years now. As it's stated here, the coloured demographic within the census coming down from 9% in 1996 to 2022. Is that an actual reduction, or could that be how these individuals are classifying themselves or how they're being classified? Is there anything in that?
I think there are a few factors. The problem is I haven't looked at the data too deeply to diagnose it accurately, but we know that there were survey problems in the Western Cape, so that might be a part of that. But also the legislative incentive to identify as a black South African rather as a coloured South African has become stronger when we look at the labour regulations and law. So when we're dealing with a large population, we shouldn't be too concerned about, I think, the various groupings. The question is, do we have economic growth? Is a better life for this larger number possible? And it should be. Economic growth really is the key.
Yeah, of course it is. Absolutely. Hermann Pretorius, always good to talk to you. Appreciate us giving us a quick breakdown of what the Census 2022 looked like. Hermann from the SA Institute of Race Relations.